a lot of young earthers that do see the Earth as a very, very young planet, they kind of want to rail repeatedly against radiocarbon dating as a science and decide whether or not it's it's reliable. But whether or not it is, there are still a lot of things going on this planet. Soil layering, rock strata, river sediments, all kinds, and whether or not the space is as constant and the speed of light and situations of space are as constant as we want to peg them for being. And that is certainly a longer conversation that could go into 25 different pig trails. But we even have like the distance from Earth to stars and the redshift that can be measured. There's too many things going on right now to say, very simply put, all the science is wrong and the Earth is very young. Well, either all the scientists are wrong, or God is a very tricky God, as you and Tom have had that conversation very many times before. He created the Earth to appear old, but it's in fact very young. That's the tricky God idea. Well, God is not a deceiver. God is not. He doesn't prop himself up to be a liar. So why would he create an Earth that looks very old and is very deceptively young? You know what I mean? There's that question too.
Well, on the cover of your book, you've got a quote here from Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, commentary, 1871, and I got to read this quote. It says, "This globe, at some undescribed period, having been convulsed and broken up," that's a mouthful right there, "was a dark and watery waste for ages, perhaps till out of this chaotic state the present fabric of the world was made by God to arise." In other words, ruin and recreation.
Right.
Now, this is, in some places, some quarters, a hot topic, I suppose, one could say. For me, it's not a hot topic. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to get all worked up about it, but it does help me to understand creation. Adam and Eve and their child and their children, and what happened to those children, and the bloodline that runs from Adam and Eve all the way through the Old Testament to the little city of Nazareth where Jesus was born. And you can trace the bloodline. And that bloodline was the solution to the entire problem. In other words, the birth of Christ came out of the bloodline that originated, if you will, in the Garden of Eden and went all the way to Mary in Nazareth and the birth of Jesus. Jesus is born, and he says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." And he demonstrated that, and he demonstrated something that had not been seen for a long, long time, namely the solution to the problem, which we're talking about. So
correct.
It's a beautiful story for me.
And that's one of the things that I think has always been my goal, even when engaging in conversations like this that appear at the onset to be, perhaps unimportant or a fringe topic, a theological non-essential, like how old is the earth and what happened before Genesis and all of these kinds of things. My goal still comes back to evangelism. My goal is still bring Jesus to the forefront. And a person may not typically look at this particular conversation as something that a person may not typically look at this kind of a conversation and think that this would accomplish that. But essentially, it's built right into it, because if a person was to approach the Bible, can I give you an example in Galileo's day?
Oh, yes.
Okay. In Galileo's day, there was, the idea was straight out of the Psalms. It says in the book of Psalms that God hath formed the earth, he established it, and that it cannot be moved. Okay. That's a provisionary statement, but it was taken literally at the time, meaning Earth does not move. So Earth is at the center of the universe and all of the planets and the sun rotate around it. That is a model called the geocentric model. It's false. It's demonstrably false. We know this. But at the time of Galileo, he got to looking through his telescopes and putting two and two together and saying, no, since the time of Copernicus, we have known that at the center of the earth, or the universe, the galaxy, is the sun, and everything rotates around it.
And I might add quickly here that it did not go well for Galileo after he made that statement.
No.
What he saw through his telescope said, my friends, I have seen such and such through my telescope, which demonstrates the following. And what happened to Galileo? He was thrown into the slammer.
Yeah, house arrest for the rest of his life. He had to recant all of his work. He was forced to recant, to essentially say, never mind, I was wrong, to pay no attention to all of the things I've said before. It didn't go well for him, but here's what happened to the lost in those days. They approached the church and they said, my eyes tell me that the way you are interpreting this psalm that says that the earth cannot be moved is not correct. And so, since that's the only way that I can accept the Bible is to accept geocentrism, which is not even true. If that's the only way I can accept the Bible, then I'm sorry, but I think the Bible is bananas. I cannot accept the Bible. The Bible is no longer relevant in this scientific age. This is hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And Galileo, for 300 years following the time of Galileo, the church stuck to their one prized pet theological understanding that the earth is at the center of the universe. Now, here we are. It's 2023 moving into 2024 soon. We know the heliocentric model is true, which is the exact opposite of that. It's that the sun is at the center and the planets rotate around it. We have no problem looking at that verse in Psalms now and saying, okay, that verse is a provisionary statement. The earth will not be moved because God is protecting it. It doesn't mean a literal science. It's not making a scientific statement. Okay, if we could do the same thing with the issue of young earth, old earth, before Genesis, if we can look at the Bible and say, this is what secular scientists are saying, it's not always true, but it's not always wrong. And this is what young earth is seeing. They have evidence that something happened 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Yeah, that's probably true too. And then we have a very old planet. If we can make Genesis relevant to the secular world and stop insisting that the only way that they can believe in God is if they believe that the earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old, then Genesis gets relevant. And when Genesis gets relevant, Genesis 3:15 gets relevant. That's the promissory note from God to man. There is coming a Messiah. His name is Jesus. This is what he's going to do. These are the prophecies that he's going to fulfill. Everything gets really close and personal to the Christ story if Genesis can be relevant in a scientific age.
And I might add, and that was a very good summation, but I would like to add that from Galileo to the present, we have perfected means of observation. And we have huge telescopes. We go into space. We orbit the moon. We send little rovers to Mars that take samples. And every time they do, they discover not perfection, they discover chaos. They discover that there have been explosions, there have been floods, and then followed by droughts, and the planets have cracked wide open, and the moon is cratered. And in other words, the whole solar system bears evidence of a collapse of some sort. Mm-hmm. But of what sort? Well, read your Bible. I believe it all tracks back to that old serpent who said, I'll be like the Most High. I'm going to take the whole thing and make it better. And what did he do? He almost destroyed it. But for God's intervention. and God provided the solution. And that's the Bible. That's the Bible we read.
It also makes sense, too, why the intervention that he provided through the blood and the sacrifice of the Son. Yeah. When you look at that, that's all of a sudden, everything connected to this earth, everything connected to this metaphysical reality, this earth that we live on right now, the salvation that we receive, it's not tied to this body, this life. It's that other one.
Yes.
It's beyond. And so it's actually really beautiful because you look at all of the sin-stained history that marks the planet we're living on now. And isn't it great that well, not only are we getting a new earth and a new Jerusalem in the end, but that the eternal state, it's not even related to what we've got going on now.